Ladies and gentlemen, let's begin into the video. If you're a regular viewer, you might recall yesterday that we put out a video concerning an updated Xbox One. So, of course, this isn't particularly new news. We've heard a lot of rumours concerning both Sony and Microsoft considering releasing an updated PlayStation or Xbox respectively. But today we have yet more reports that the company are not just thinking of releasing another Xbox, a new standard Xbox, but also a new controller as well. And this is all going to be unveiled, supposedly, during E3. So let's first of all talk about the controller itself. So the current controller for the Xbox One is pretty sweet, at least in my opinion. I actually really like the controller for the Xbox One, and for me it's a bit of a toss-up whether I prefer it or the DualShock 4, of course bundled with the PS4. However, supposedly, despite the fact that we are still a couple of weeks away, several weeks away actually, from E3, sources inside the company are murmuring that we can expect to see a new hardware event, and there will be a new standard controller which will be shipping with the Xbox One. Now, we don't know what the design's going to look like yet, unfortunately, but supposedly it's going to look very similar to the current design, but it's going to be a new colour. Now, we don't know what that new colour is going to be, however, there are some who are speculating it's going to be white because, and I quote, a white default design seems like a decent mid-cycle refresh for the console to help spur sales. Honestly speaking, I think that the Xbox One's controller is pretty good. I mean, potentially there might be a few changes here and there, maybe for example, integrated battery, which some people would love, some people wouldn't like so much. Maybe slight changes to the D-pad or what have you, maybe make it, I don't know, maybe slightly balance the weight more, maybe slightly improve the components for slightly better battery life, but overall, honestly, the controller is almost perfect, and I really like it. Moving on, however, and let's talk about the ecosystem of the Xbox One and the PC. So, once again, according to this new report, the company is exploring new interactions between the PC and the Xbox One to extend the capabilities between the two systems. Primarily, this will be game streaming. Supposedly, Microsoft want to make Windows 10 on the desktop and the Xbox One a, quote, killer combination. And so they're basically wanting to create an ecosystem between the two. I guess you could say almost like a... what would be the best word for it? A symbiotic relationship, I suppose? It's kind of like, I guess, Sony tried to do with the Vita and the PS4, but obviously this would be at grander scale. My only concern for this is, let's say you're a high-end PC gamer. How many folks are going to buy an Xbox One, particularly if there are not a lot of exclusives on the system? And if there are not exclusives, you're not going to buy a game which is also available on the PC, generally speaking. Having said that, I'm saying that in the perspective of I don't know what Microsoft are planning. So, possibly there could be some cool features that Microsoft are going to bring in. And this could also be really cool if you start to factor in other such possibilities, like Microsoft wanting to, as I've mentioned before, have the Xbox One to be almost like an entry-level system, or where you can buy an Xbox One game and it will also be playable on the PC. So once again, universal apps or universal programs, and it's almost like a bit like Killer Instinct in that regard. That would be kind of cool. And it would also be something that Sony could not replicate, of course, on the PlayStation ecosystem. Now, this is, I guess you could say, the big piece of news, and I'm going to read this out from the article verbatim. While the rumours of a PS4K have been running rampant, and I don't know yet if the device is set to take on that console, they will have another, much larger hardware-related announcement at E3 this year. I had previously heard they were working on a new Elite console, and they recently announced a new Elite bundle, but I'm not sure whether this is an update to that product or something new. This year will be a big year for Microsoft at E3 as the company once again tries to show that its console is a better choice when sized up against a PS4. As I learn more about this new hardware, I'll make sure to pass it along." End quote. To be honest, there is a lot of speculation that you could levy at the hardware, and we did certainly go into some of that yesterday. But potentials are that the Xbox One is going to receive a hardware upgrade. It could be that the Xbox One is going to be slimline, cost-reduced model, for example, about $200. It could be that Microsoft are planning to introduce a more powerful Xbox One next year. I guess a lot of it really depends on whether Microsoft were happy with the Xbox One's performance, and whether they believe that simply increasing the performance of the machine is enough to get them sales or not. Really and truly though, we have to wait until E3, but there is a lot of speculation and a lot of potential for Microsoft. And I know I've used this chestnut a dozen times over, but it bears repeating. Microsoft as a company care about you in their ecosystem. They care about you using Windows 10. They care about you buying things from their store. They care about developers creating games in DirectX 12. They care about the developers being part of their software ecosystem. This is whether they're designing games and programming them from C#, this is whether they're using DirectX 12, this is whether they're using, I don't know, bloody development tools or not. It's irrelevant to Microsoft. They just want you as part of their ecosystem so they can leverage that, so they can use that as part of their IPs, whether they can use that as part of their sales tactics, because that's kind of how Microsoft are tackling this whole situation now. It's almost a service-based thing. I guess you could say in a way it's almost Steam on steroids, because obviously the thing about Steam, and Valve have tried to get and become an OS provider, and they have to a degree, but obviously nowhere near as prolific as Microsoft with Windows. So Microsoft are trying to leverage that. The company has a really good chance at E3 of, I guess you could say, reigniting the desire from gamers. And really, it's going to be a very, 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 very weird E3, I think, for everyone. Because Sony are going to say to you, well, presumably, if the rumours of the PS4K/Neo are true, Sony are going to say to you, hey, we've got this new device, here's why you should buy it. Microsoft are going to say to you, hey, here's the Xbox One, potentially a new powerful version or a slimline version, here's why you should buy into our ecosystem. It's almost like both companies are not exactly at square one again, but they're basically touting for business again. And it's a very weird situation, because it was only 3 years ago, roughly, that we're in this exact same situation. So it'll be very interesting to see what Microsoft, what Sony, what everyone have learned, see what type of support the developers are going to provide both ecosystems, to see what the, I guess, reception from you as a customer is going to be. Personally speaking, I would really love for Microsoft to do the following, and this is not a verbatim, desire, but this is what I would like, kind of, for them to release a very cost-reduced Xbox One, however they do that. But let's just say they make the unit smaller, 14nm, all the regular stuff that we've discussed a dozen times over, so I won't go through it all, but essentially the same Xbox One that you know, you love, or maybe you're considering buying. Great. They don't release the PS4K equivalent now. Maybe they do that next year, and they release it to be slightly more powerful than the PS4K, and they could almost release it as like an Xbox 2 or an intermittent hardware upgrade, and that I think would work quite nicely for Microsoft. So maybe they would release this, let's say next year around Christmas time, and it would almost be like resetting things for Microsoft. I think that would be kind of cool for them to kind of get their ducks in a row, for the old saying. That's not to say that I'd be adverse to seeing a new Xbox this year with new hardware upgrades. Let's say the system's 3 times more powerful than the current Xbox One, which would put it roughly on the level of the PS4K. I'm obviously rounding things up here. I think it would be kind of cool. But it really depends on, and if Microsoft do that, it depends on whether they had decided or taken into account the PS4K. For example, let's say that they'd had internally said to themselves, well, gee, I'm not happy with being so far behind the PS4, the vanilla machine. Let's release an upgraded machine. So they'd release a machine that's capable of about 2.5 teraflops of computing power, and obviously I'm just pulling figures out of the air here. And then they heard rumours that Sony were releasing a machine which was actually about 4.2 teraflops of computing power, and they said, no, we're actually going to delay things because we don't want to be further behind again. And honestly, I wouldn't blame Microsoft. So we just don't know really what the company is internally considering. We do know, however, that both companies are considering something, and to be honest, I would be all for a premium model, cost-reduced system, maybe a couple of different models for the Xbox One. Maybe they're going to release one which is really bare bones, really cheap, $200, and the current system that they're also considering is a streaming model. It's got Blu-ray support, 4K Blu-ray support, just to be clarify, and it's also got, you know, the Netflix 4K, it's got everything else. Then again, maybe they could do that as the base model for the Slimline as well, because once again, if they're doing die shrinks and they're potentially moving over to Polaris, obviously Polaris is theoretically or backwards compatible, then Polaris, it has native HDMI 2.0 support anywho, which means once again 4K support, which means hunky-dory. Let me know your thoughts on this one. What would you like to see Microsoft reveal? Anyway, take care of yourself. Bye for now.